After World War II had ended, a new boom for the American roadside began. More than 10 million GIs came home ready to have families and looking for a place to settle down away from the downtowns and farms where they'd been raised. A promising future lay ahead. Americans wanted to get where they were going and get there fast in millions of new American cars.
Good for a highway, good for the blues, good for a school kid breaking all the rules.
With Main Street in the rearview mirror, the new frontier of the American middle class became the suburbs.
There were shopping centers out on the edges of town, and these shopping centers began to draw all the business out of Main Street. People wanted to live in their own little houses on their own little plots of land, and so many, many housing developments were built. This created an influx of traffic that caused the creation of a whole new generation of roadside businesses beside these growing strips.
Between 1945 and 1954, 31 million babies were born, up nearly 30% from the 1930s. All those carloads of new parents and new children needed somewhere to shop and to eat and to amuse themselves. It didn't take long for roadside entrepreneurs to satisfy those needs.
Baby, when the sun goes down, gonna head out to the sky view. You say you crashed your daddy's car, well, I guess I'll have to drive you.
What the newly suburban masses seemed to crave most was entertainment. From the landscape emerged an amusement that had been little exploited up to then, the drive-in movie theater. It perfectly blended America's two greatest loves, cars and the movies.
I'll pay our admission to park under the moon. I'm not sure what's playing, but I know we will be soon.
Drive-in theater was the perfect melding of all of Americans' interests. It could be in your car, you could be alone, you got to see a movie, you could eat while you were doing that. So it really answered all the things that Americans loved about their cars.
The post-war era was the golden age of the drive-in movie theater. In 1941, only 50 screens existed, an average of just one per state. By 1958, 4,000 drive-ins lit up the night across the country. And as they rose from the empty lots from the farmland and fields of grain that were being lost to suburbia, they were called by all sorts of names. Under the Sky Emporiums, Auditoriums, Mudholes, and the nickname that needs no explanation, Passion Pits. Slowly but surely, drive-ins became much more than just movie theaters beneath the stars.
Drive-in theaters were in existence as early as 1934, but really hit their stride after the post-war period, when families really made the difference as far as their attendance. And rather than taking your family into a theater and getting dressed up, it was much easier to jump in the car, take the family, and casually enjoy a show in your car. Became very quickly, again after the war, part of what the roadside was all about.
In record numbers, families packed their kids into the backseat for a night outside at the movies. Sprawled across an average of 15 acres, the largest drive-ins could hold up to 2,000 cars. Many a drive-in went to great and sometimes kooky lengths to attract and appeal to this emerging clientele. The backs of the huge movie screens were often adorned with elaborate murals that faced the side of the road and could be seen from afar. By the 1950s, owners had started promoting special amenities. This is where good old-fashioned American ingenuity really kicked in.
Well, drive-in theaters offered every imaginable amenity. You could have your baby bottle warmed. They would offer free diapers. You could drop off your laundry and have that done while you watch the movies. And of course, outside they offered all sorts of attractions. They would have swimming pools, miniature trains, Ferris wheels and merry-go-rounds, horseshoe pits. So drive-ins really were the first complete entertainment centers.
And there were off-the-wall publicity stunts. One theater owner in Seattle, Washington, hired young girls to actually picket his movie theater. Their gripe? The family fun of drive-in movies was cutting into their babysitting business. Of course, it was all a ruse, but great publicity for the theater. But the best window of opportunity for bringing in revenue was just 10 minutes long, the intermission. During those few minutes, concession stands produced 70% of their business. Early drive-ins tried sending snack carts car to car, but the often unwanted intrusion turned off customers who needed privacy. Drive-in owners soon determined that a central concession was the way to go. To deal with the volumes of people, drive-ins pioneered cafeteria-style lines with a number of customer lanes and sections. They served up the staples as well as the exotic, including a rarity at the time, pizza. In fact, for many years, one of the only places to get a quick slice was the drive-in. At the concessions, you could feed the whole family. Of course, some people brought their own food. If a patron wanted to snap beans while she watched the movie, that was her choice. If you didn't get something to eat during the intermission at the drive-in movie theater, there was an alternative, the drive-in restaurant. Throughout the 1950s, a whole new wave of restaurants were popping up along the roadside to satisfy appetites for food served quickly. By 1964, there were 35,000 drive-in eateries across the country. Car hops, the era's ubiquitous drive-in restaurant waitresses, developed their own little subculture. Waiting on 8 to 12 cars at a time, the hops created their own unofficial tip rating system. Women, lousy tippers. Students, not much better. Middle-aged men, they meant hefty profits. But the best tippers of all, hands down, they were sailors. One drive-in required all hops to laugh at the customers' jokes. The penalty for not grinning? Folding 1,000 napkins. Car hops had a tough job. But as the 50s progressed, so did other drive-in services.
In 1955, a new wrinkle was added to the 50s drive-in craze when a building management firm and a parking chain combined in Washington, D.C. to promote the drive-in office. No elevators and no people from ramp to Rolodex in 4.5 seconds. The perfect setup for the everyday workaholic.
Some holy rollers found praying in their automobiles a divine experience. Throughout the decade, road worship took on many forms. In 1957, Jack Kerouac inspired a generation to find itself in the twists and turns of America's byways with his classic book, On the Road. And on the silver screen, the road was the destination.
Riding their jalopies through the dust en route to Hollywood on bus.
But as this decade came to a close, the coming of the faceless, interminable superhighway loomed. Rather than serving as destinations themselves, these roads would soon become, quite literally, throughways. But for now, the lure of the open road was still the stuff of dreams. American dreams.
Highway Hangouts, America's Roadside Attractions, will return in a moment. Hangouts, America's Roadside Attractions.
By 1956, America's roads represented the truest symbol of the nation's success. 65 million cars were on the roads, and it was time for the great era of highway building to begin.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Under President Dwight Eisenhower, the Federal Highway Act of 1956 kicked off the construction of some 41,000 miles of interconnecting interstate highways. To build these interstates, workers dug up enough dirt to cover the entire state of Connecticut knee-high. Americans took instantly to the interstates. By 1960, they were driving 400 billion miles annually. In the old days, getting to your destination was half the fun. On the interstate, it was about getting to where you needed to go as fast as possible. That sensibility marked the beginning of the end for the mom and pops along the road.
A lot of businesses relating to the interstate would form pockets on the off-ramps, and chain restaurants would then cater to these people off the interstate. But as far as coming into main roads and patronizing motels and local theaters and drive-ins and all of these highway businesses, they all took a second hand to the interstate travel. And that was kind of the death knell for the roadside.
Roadside places were once destinations in themselves. In the age of the interstate, drivers bypassed the old roads and old haunts. They now stopped at establishments that were familiar and reliable.
The large franchised and corporate chains that grew up beside the interstate offered a predictability of facilities, a standardized, pretty good quality kind of experience, but not an individualized one.
A home builder from Memphis, Tennessee, a man named Kemmons Wilson, would be one of the first to fill this need for reliability and revolutionize the look of the roadside. His epiphany began in 1951, when he packed the wife and kids into the car and headed north to Washington, D.C. for a vacation. By then, variety in roadside lodging was no novelty, and many of the motels and cabins were either past their prime or were shoddy to begin with. Appalled by his overnight stops, Wilson described the trip as the worst vacation of his life. He measured each room and set about to come up with an alternative. One of his employees, a draftsman, drew up plans for a one-story motel. He had seen the Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire film Holiday Inn the night before, and that's what he labeled the plans. Kemmons Wilson liked the plans and loved the name. The Holiday Inn was launched. In 1952, the prototype opened in Memphis. It was strategically placed at the entrance to the city. The sign that was to become famous told anybody within a half a mile that there was a Holiday Inn here. He offered the traveling public a gift shop, a pool, a restaurant with good food and free lodging for the kids. Once inside, travelers were greeted by bigger standardized rooms decorated in chartreuse and white, compliments of another designer, Kemmons' own mother, Ruby Doll Wilson. People loved it. By 1954, the business was a franchise operation, with each Holiday Inn owner paying Wilson's company an initial fee of $500 plus a nickel a night per room. By 1968, there were 1,000 Holiday Inns, with a new inn opening every 3 days and a new room going up every 20 minutes. By 1970, this chain had become the first food service and lodging company to ever earn $1 billion. By the mid-1990s, there were over 2,000 worldwide. Fast food also became a staple for drivers on the go who didn't have time to search for Mom's or Pop's delicious homemade fixings. As a result, another franchise would prove more successful than perhaps any other in history.
You're the one. Your leg muffins waiting.
Two all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Two all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, onions, pickles, onions on a little.
All beef patty, pickles, lettuce.
Taste of McDonald's.
Thanks to the hamburger, a milkshake mixer salesman, Ray Kroc, would become a roadside legend. In 1954, he bought out Dick and Mac McDonald's hamburger stands, and by 1962, this burgeoning roadside chain sold hamburger number 700 million. Today, Downey, California is home to the oldest original Golden Arches, part of a worldwide business with annual sales of more than $25 billion. The 1950s launched dozens of these franchise success stories, like Stuckey's, Best Western, and the Ramada Inn. Another was the Howard Johnson chain.
On the road around the corner, here's the place to go. The orange roof of Howard Johnson's. Join the folks who know.
Good food, good fun, kids count too.
28 flavors just for you at Howard Johnson's. Next up.
At the same time the franchises were scooping up all the roadside business, the mom and pops were shutting their doors.
Oh man, this river's run dry. There's too much whiskey and not enough
But in San Luis Obispo, California, there's a motel that stands as a kind of national treasure. One of the few roadside establishments that was just too special to ever close, the Madonna Inn.
Welcome to Madonna Inn.
The Madonna Inn offers travelers the very opposite of what Holiday Inn has to offer. And Holiday Inn has to offer a standardized, conventional motel room. At the Madonna Inn, Alex and Phyllis Madonna have 109 motel rooms, and every single one of them is completely different.
In 1958, Alex Madonna and his wife Phyllis went into the motel business. They had their own design ideas.
We had a very difficult time trying to choose one thing, so we decided to do a little bit of everything, and feeling that maybe we'll make more people happy because not all of us have the same taste. And Alex has an old expression of, what is it that you say when you're asked that question?
If you have every room different, you can't make the same mistake twice.
Up in the attic is the Cloud 9 room. A suspended angel blesses and protects the lucky inhabitants. In the Irish Hills room, babbling brooks, shamrocks, and leprechauns help you sleep better at night. Want to have a rendezvous with a loved one? There are 3 appropriate rooms to choose from: Ron, Day, and Woo. And for something really different, the waterfall urinal. But the most sought-after place to sleep is the caveman room, with enough bedrock to make Fred Flintstone feel at home.
We've had Doris Day, Peggy Lee, Frank Sinatra, George Burns. I just can't think of all of them, but we've had them all at one time or another. Kim Novak, and I think everyone but Madonna, which is okay.
Perhaps there's still hope for those with individual tastes.
I think there's been a renewed interest in roadside businesses in recent years because we can always go to a chain restaurant even right near home, but the old roadside places offer a glimpse of not only a different era, but a different way of living, where your meal is cooked right there for you instead of arriving frozen daily. And where every motel you stay at is a little bit different. It's not the exact same experience no matter where you're at.
The nostalgic yearning for the open road, for the unexpected experience awaiting just around the bend, is still alive on the road that cuts through America, Route 66. Once again, over 20,000 vehicles a year travel the Mother Road long after its heyday of the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Roadside motor court, cabins made of sandstone. Traveling in style was a port in the storm.
Over 4,000 members belong to Route 66 associations worldwide. They're looking for a part of America they've only heard about. And all of a sudden, what was old is new again.
Route 66 is attracting people from all over the world, and it's really been a boon to those places that had sat dormant for a quarter century.
Even some of the big corporations have gotten the message. From the 1920s through the 1960s, gas stations prided themselves on service, clean restrooms, and free maps. Then they became stripped-down operations, offering little more than self-service gas pumps. Now, some are trying to win back customers with smiling service attendants and sparkling restrooms. Of course, however wide the smile, they will never take the place of family businesses.
We've lost the romance of travel. When you could stop at mom and pop, you could visit with them. You knew who you were talking to, and you remembered them. Sometimes you became friends. And you would go back there again on your next trip, and they would still be there. You don't do that today. You don't know anybody. You've lost that.
But what we haven't lost is the legacy of those moms and pops who guided us on our roadside adventures, who figured out ways to put gas in our cars, food in our bellies, and pillows beneath our heads. They're the ones who dreamed up the highway hangouts that are so much a part of our roadside memories. Whatever has been lost of the great American roadside may never be fully recaptured. But one thing is certain. In America, the road will always symbolize adventure, freedom, something wild, something real.
In 1966, executives from all the big oil companies were summoned to the White House for a top-level meeting. Lady Bird Johnson complained about their gas stations, which she considered ugly and a blight on the American landscape. But there was at least one service station that met with her approval, a Phillips 66 outlet in Cloquet, Minnesota. It was designed in 1958 by famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who felt its copper roof, skylights, and luxurious customer lounge would lead to a new era in gas station design. Of course, Wright's new era never arrived, but his gas station is still in business, still pumping Phillips 66 at the intersection of highways 33 and 45 in northern Minnesota. In addition to fuel and oil, it's probably the only place in the world where you can get a guided tour of a gas station. For the History Channel, I'm Roger Mudd. Thanks for watching.
Now, from the History Channel, you can own Highway Hangouts on home video for $29.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-708-1776 to order.
good for a highway.
Coming up next, enter the notorious subculture of the Hells Angels on In Search of History. Then terrorist hit Pan